Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another week of BlastCast. Of course, I am Jar, so with me, as always, is my bastion of common sense, Lightning Dragon. And of course, as you all know, 3.0 is still not out, and looks like it's going to be pushed back now to the point that Evocati might be testing by the time the Gamescom starts. But maybe not even that. I really don't care. I've got having a lot of fun with Interstellar Rift, so I'll play that in the meantime. But of that, it looks like there are 14 blockers listed that they need to remove before they even consider going to Evocati. It looks like they also might be getting rid, or at least pushing back, not getting rid of, but pushing back the character customization to a later build. And I remember, I think we talked about that last week, didn't we? You said it was one of those things that just didn't make sense to keep around if it was delaying it.
But it might have been one of them, yeah.
Yeah, there was that and the pistol. I think as we were saying, it's just like no, those really aren't that important, guys. Move those further, down the road. But yeah, so that's good. I really don't care if I can customize my character right now. It's nice and all to do that, but right now I'd rather be able just to test landing on the moons, and the missions and systems and stuff like that. I really don't need to know if someone has put a scar on their cheek from 500 yards away as I'm shooting at them in a spaceship. It doesn't really affect my life. Well, Around the Verse was amazingly short this week, right around 16 minutes, so I'm not going to get into it too much because obviously there's about 12 minutes of actual show in there, and talking about 12-minute show for 20 minutes seems kind of ridiculous. So
they basically talked about TVs and reflections.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah, render to texture, how it's going to basically even work for mirrors and holograms and all sorts of really amazing things. But I'm impressed with the technology. I am. The fact that it looks like they could actually, technically, with this system, have a mirror facing a mirror and make it work. Because remember the first time I ever tried to create a level in an FPS, I made the ultimate mistake of putting two mirrors facing each other, and then stood and looked at one and watched my frame rate go to hell. But that was a long time ago. That was Duke Nukem 3D. That was like that was how long ago that was. Good gravy. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. Of course, now looking at this technology, now it makes me really kind of think they should throw that Reliant news van back on sale, because if this had launched, if this technology had been coming out when they were releasing that Reliant, I think a lot more people would have snapped that up, because now it looks like being a journalist might have a lot more of a future than it did when it was kind of like vaguely put out there as news van. So since there isn't a lot to talk about this week as far as Around the Verse goes, what we want to kind of discuss is kind of an ongoing issue that Star Citizen has been having since pretty much its inception. And this is kind of going out to all you mouse players out there, because, as much as, I'm not much of an IM person, there are things on the mouse I would like to see improved for y'all, because I feel that you're kind of getting shafted when it comes to, in particular, using fixed weaponry. And the big problem that Star Citizen is facing on this is that their virtual stick is garbage. And there's no nice way to say it. I'd like to be subtle about it, but having seen a lot of virtual sticks out there, it's probably one of the worst period virtual sticks that's ever existed. And because they don't give you any defining boundaries, they don't give you any defined dead zones. It's shaped like a bow tie, and some people like to refer to it as a maxi pad, which is probably a closer shape, but I couldn't find a nice I could find a good bow tie image to superimpose here, but I didn't know if throwing a maxi pad image on that, but whatever. Just use the bow tie, make the middle a little bit fatter than that, and you get the general idea. And the wider your resolution and the more screens you have, like if you have 3 screens, your virtual stick will actually extend into the other screens. So there's no consistency. So we've been playing, of course, been doing the series for Interstellar Rift. And now while their virtual stick is very basic, you don't have the ability to set curves, and the only way you can set, quote unquote, set curves is through basically the rotation speed that you create for your ship, the amount of thrusters you put on there. So, and I'm not very versed in it, but showing the footage here of doing these fights with this, you can clearly see there's an outer boundary that's defined. This is your maximum deflection. In the center there, and it's pretty light, but you might be able to see it. I hope you can anyway. Is another circle in the middle. That's your dead zone. And these visual indicators, you can see they're not really in your way. They're there. They're good markers. And think of it as looking straight down on a stick. If you had a stick on your desk, you look straight down on it. That's kind of what this represents. Now, I suck at virtual stick. I'll just be honest with you. This for me is like riding a bike for the first time. I just keep falling and skinning my knee, and it's not pretty. I think Lightning's had a few issues with it too, but that's before we knew about the rotation speeds.
Yeah, when I started editing one of the larger ships, I didn't add any extra thrusters onto it. So I was kind of laughing like, oh, I've gone down from like 50 or 60 or maybe even 70 when it had it before, all the way down to like 44 or something. I'm like, this thing's going to turn like a turd now. And honestly, it was easier to fly because it wasn't as jerky and rapid in response time.
Right. And this is where we're working our way down towards. I wanted to do a much more extensive video getting into the pacing in Star Citizen and why that's an issue, but I felt that to get there, I needed to explain some things and explain where some issues were in the game first to kind of lay out things that need to be fixed. And it really can't get much more basic than your control interfaces. This virtual stick whole issue should have been rectified years ago. But I think this comes down to the idea that Chris Roberts has said a long time ago, mouse for aiming, stick for flying. And basically has ignored the fact that for the last decade or more, people have been competing online with virtual stick, have been using it in simulations. Here's a picture of someone flying, here's a video actually of someone using mouse and keyboard with on DCS flying an A10 Warhog. And if I remember, the A10 is one of the hardest expansions, and they're actually doing it and doing it well. So if you can get a mouse and keyboard interface to even work on a very complicated simulator like DCS and have it done well. In fact, one of the advantages he has here is he can go quickly to the MFDs with very little downtime, since his fingers are already right there in the keys anyway, and do exactly what he needs to do and get right back into it. So
if mouse was for aiming and joystick was for flying, in reality, is mouse wouldn't work at all if you jumped into the seat of any of the ships. Basically, you'd have to fly either keyboard only, WASD, very jerky, very unresponsive, or you'd have to have a joystick. And if that's what he meant, clearly they missed a step here, because that's not how it works.
Well, yeah, and that goes to the idea that basically there's an issue here. We got to start with the base, and then they basically have attached band-aids onto this. So instead of, first of all, dealing with the underlying issue, that you need to have a nice virtual stick for the mouse users, because a lot of mouse users out there are using interactive mode, obviously. Some use relative, and like one of my favorite posters, Alien War, who helped me with some feedback on this, he's a relative user for mouse, and he cannot use IM because the way it's set up. Stick users can't use IM, and mouse IM users, many of them can't use the large fixed weapons. Now, with a good virtual stick, you could actually start doing that. You would have the ability to, with practice, of course, use those large fixed weapons with the same proficiency. See, because while the stick has the advantage of when you let go of it, it goes back to center, and the mouse doesn't. You have to move it back to center. Where the mouse gets its advantage is it's perfectly precise on the deflection, meaning that as you move it outside of the center, like with a stick, you're fighting your muscle twitches, you're fighting a spring or whatever it is pulling the stick back to center. But with the mouse, you can literally set it at deflection, take your hands off it if you want. It's not going to move. And it's a very, very precise deflection, and that's where it compensates for it and makes it up. So it's one of those things that I would like them to see them go in and fix this, because it's 4, maybe 5 years overdue for them to give you mouse users out there a really good, viable virtual stick, and not the worst one I've ever seen in the history of flight games ever. So basically, there's not a lot to talk about this week. I wanted to first lay out the idea, the concept of Star Citizen's virtual stick and the issues therein real quick. Let me know what you think down below about that. Are you happy with their current setup, or their virtual stick? Are there any of my subscribers out there using fixed weapons with the current stick and finding it efficient enough? Or would you like to see this kind of change come in, something where it's fixed boundaries and no matter what resolution it is, it's always just the same on your screen? Are there other games that you've used virtual stick on that you've been successful with? Anyway, guys, like I said, not too much this week. This is kind of going to be part of an ongoing series. We're trying to break things down because I must have 5 pages typed here of conversation I had last night, and to get where we need to go, what I'm trying to get to, it would be impossible to get there without explaining these components first. And we're moving towards pacing and how that's going to affect 3.0. But first, we got to lay out some ground rules and understand some basic things and go from there. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week. Let's hope there's more news next week. We're getting closer and closer to Gamescom. Here's hoping we see Evil Cotty come out before I hit my next birthday. All right, guys.
It's going to explode in a giant fireball and everyone will die.
Always the
Bye-bye,
optimist.
everybody.
Bye.